Dr. Rex Marco obtained his degree in biology sciences at the UC Irvine and then graduated medical school at UCLA. He then completed an orthopedic surgery residency at UC Davis and a fellowship training at the Musculoskeletal Oncology at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center and in Reconstructive Spine Surgery at Rush-Presbyterian-St Luke's Medical Center in Chicago. He began his academic career at MD Anderson Cancer Center, followed by a few years in private practice and nearly a decade at the University of Texas Medical School in Houston. He then became the vice chairman of orthopedic surgery at Houston's Methodist Hospital, where his surgical career was tragically shortened when he broke his neck in a mountain bicycle accident. And then he was paralyzed from the neck down. He is currently Chief Medical Ambassador for the Christopher and Dana Reeves Foundation, where he also serves on the Quality of Life Grants Committee and Advocacy Committee. Dr. Marco has always sought to be the best father, physician, surgeon, and teacher that he could be. He is known to be creative and transformative in his practice and teachings, but says that his real transformation came when he was forced into recovery, when he experienced difficulties related to his severe codependency with his mar-anon qualifiers. And tonight, he'll be sharing his recovery story with us. We are honored that Dr. Rex Marco is sharing his testimony with us tonight, and I am very grateful to call him my friend. Rex, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Aubrey. And I will start with my story as a child. And from what I've been told, when I was 3, my grandmother came and took my mom and my brother and sister and I away from my father because he was abusive and put my mom in a closet and stepped on her and would yell at her. And he was a slob and a bad husband and a bad father. And now I know that that removal from my father was one of my first abandonment wounds. And although I don't remember this, I was told that my grandmother then brought my brother and I to Chicago to put us up for adoption. But my mother didn't want that. So she tried to keep us all together, but she couldn't. And my sister and I went to live with my aunt. And all this time, and throughout my childhood and life, I don't remember ever receiving a hug from anyone in my family. We were reunited with my mom when she married my stepfather. And I went to school in first grade. And one of the most vivid memories of my childhood was when my mom said to me, "Do you want to have a birthday party?" And we had just moved there and I had made some friends and I said, yes, excitedly. And she said, okay, we'll invite some of your friends and we'll have it this Saturday. And Saturday came and nobody came to my birthday party. And I remember that being one of the saddest days in my life. And I remember telling myself then that I'll never get excited for anything again because I don't ever want to feel that kind of pain again. That was another abandonment wound for me. And when I was an adolescent, my father, who mostly ignored me and my brothers and sisters, when we went to visit my grandmother, he suddenly became engaging with my brother and sister and I. He was talking about what we wanted to be when we grew up. And he turned and looked at me and said, "What do you want to be?" And I told him that I'm thinking about becoming a doctor. And he looked at me and he said, "Hmm." And he turned around. I had those abandonment wounds, which I believe led to my love addiction issues. But I also feel like I grew up as the hero child. And I started to realize that I got accolades if I did things well, like in school. And with those accolades, I tried harder and harder in school and to try and please people because I realized that the more I tried and the better I did, the happier people were. And I think this contributed to my people pleasing issues. And I worked really hard and got into a very competitive field in medicine, and then took on the most difficult and stressful areas within that field. And I did my best to perfect my trade and be as exact as I can and have high expectations for myself and others. And this led to me having what I considered a very successful career and family life with a nice house and nice cars and kids who I thought were successful in getting into great schools and with their athletic achievements. And I felt a lot of pride with how successful I was and they were. And then my life came crashing down. And I realized that none of that was real. And all of my childhood issues and the way I decided to work through or survive through those abandonment issues and enmeshment issues led to broken relationships with every one of my family members and life-threatening issues with me and my family members. And for me, I could no longer sleep at night. I had high blood pressure and prediabetes and unrecognized depression and anxiety. And all of these are, I now believe, are all stress related. And then all of this led us to find recovery, and we tried to find recovery in an alternative peer group. And I heard the steps for the first time. And I worked through those steps the first meeting I went to. I heard them. I said, oh, my life isn't unmanageable, and I'm not powerless. I'm as powerful as I want to be. So I finished step 1, and step 2 became willing to admit that a power outside of myself could restore me to sanity. I told myself I'm not insane, and this step is crazy, so I'm not going to do that one. And step 3 was about surrendering to God. And if I surrendered, that meant I was giving up. So I'm not going to do that one. And doing a fearless moral inventory, I was happy to do that one. And talk about it with someone else, happy to do that one. And step 6, when I was willing to admit I had defects, I didn't believe I had any, so I wasn't going to do that one. And step 7 was talking about shortcomings, and I thought that was shaming and wasn't going to do that one. Step 8, making a list of people that I harmed, I was willing to do that. And making amends to them, I was willing to do that. And 10, forgot what I had said about that one right now. And 11, prayer. Well, I wasn't knowledgeable about that and didn't want to do that. I was meditating, so I was happy to do that. And I finished all the steps because I knew I could go to meetings and serve other people and share. And then I got introduced to Cornerstone and climbers and met my counselor, Joe. And he told me that it sounded like I'm my own sponsor. And if you're your own sponsor, your sponsor's an idiot. So he strongly encouraged that all of us get a sponsor. He didn't actually call me an idiot, but I just inferred that from his message. And I got a sponsor. I started working the steps. I went to climbers every week. I went to men's meetings and codependency groups and got my own therapist, which I thought only crazy people went to therapists. I found connections and love and acceptance from people in the group and a lot of shame reduction by sharing with safe people. It was shameful for me what was happening to me and my family, and sharing with like-minded, loving people really helped me reduce my shame and move from isolation to connection. And through this process, I learned that the core issues that Pia Melody talks about are that we are born valuable and vulnerable and perfectly imperfect. and we're born dependent. And spontaneous. If we get nurtured with these issues, then we could find balance. But if we don't, then my value became judgmental and self-victimizing. And I was not able to know what humility was and know that I am not better than or less than anybody else. And my vulnerability could be protected with healthy boundaries by communicating from my primary emotion from a vulnerable standpoint. But that's not what I learned. I learned to wall off and or be boundaryless and have no boundaries. And my reality was no longer that it's okay to be perfectly imperfect, but I needed to be perfect, and I needed everyone else around me to be perfect as well. And I became completely anti-dependent on many things and with many things, and felt I could do everything on my own. Or I became dependent on pleasing people and working hard, and addicted to excitement and dependent on excitement, and living in my love addiction and love avoidance. I didn't learn to be balanced and interdependent. And instead of being spontaneous and living in moderation, I became controlling and needing to control everything in my life. And I was addicted to control and still am addicted to control. I also learned that I was spiritually wounded and grew up with a fear-based God. I made up that my grandfather's God was a fear-based God, and my grandfather's God was my God. And that spiritual wound was still present until I found the love and acceptance of Cornerstone and the steps. We talk about learning emotional intelligence, and an abbreviation for that is EI. And for me, my EI stood for emotionally ignorant and numb. And I attribute that partly due to my abandonment wounds and my first birthday, when I said, I will never get excited for anything again, because I didn't want to feel that pain. Thankfully, with recovery, one of our family therapists taught me that in our evaluation, when I came there with peace and calm and what I thought was spiritual healing, she told me that she was afraid or concerned that I would never experience the fullness of an emotional life. And when she told me that, I realized that my meditation and yoga was actually a spiritual bypass. It was not spiritual healing. And thankfully, through other work and courses and the steps, I learned how to feel my emotions and gain emotional intelligence. And through the steps, I learned to be honest and realize that my life was unmanageable and that I was powerless over my issues of control and perfectionism and going one up and going one down, being the judge and the victim all at the same time. And I came to believe that my life was insane and that I was insane because I was doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And the third step, prayer, allowed me to surrender to a power outside of myself. And I love that prayer, and I'll say it now because it's something that I've said for every day for the last 4 years since I started recovery. And my sponsor took me through that step. And it's, God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and to do with me as thy will. Relieve me of the bondage of self so that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties so that victory over them may bear witness to those that would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. And every day that helps me start my day and be less likely to harm other people, which the fourth step taught me that I harm so many people with my self-will and my fears and my anger and resentment. And sharing that fourth step with my sponsor helped reduce that shame and gain connection. And I had a spiritual experience after that sharing with him, which is what the big book talks about. And the third step prayer helps me realize that I do have defects and shortcomings, and that I can have humility and not go one up and one down and know I'm better than or less than other people. And when I got to steps 8 and 9 and made amends to people I had harmed, I had a spiritual awakening. And 10, 11, and 12 helped me grow every day and make sure that I do my best not to harm myself or other people with my thoughts, words, or actions. And I learned how to pray with God, not at God. and to help other people with my experience, strength, and hope. And I was riding my mountain bike with our group, and one part of the trail, I decided to turn left instead of go right. And as I was turning back up onto the trail, my tire stopped. And the next thing I knew, I felt a crack or heard a crack. And I wasn't sure if the crack was my helmet or my neck. And so in that moment, I started saying the Serenity Prayer. And I asked God to grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, which I knew I couldn't take back that turn or that crack. And whatever happened was going to happen. And I asked for serenity in that moment. And I just focused on my breath and did my best to take deep breaths and calm myself and be in that moment. And then my friend came and he had panic in his voice. And I asked him to touch my leg, and he told me he was. And I asked him if I was moving my leg, and he told me I wasn't. And I asked him to touch my hand and tell me if I was moving it. And he said no. And in that moment, I knew that crack was my neck that broke. And I knew I was paralyzed. And I knew that I had less than 5% chance of walking again. I knew that I may never hold my unborn child or go back to work. And I had serenity and acceptance for the things that I could not change. And after my surgery, I was in the ICU. And every day, and every moment, I woke up and lived in the present moment. And thankfully, my friends in recovery introduced me to the Panda Planner. And the Panda Planner, we start our day by listing 3 things we're grateful for. And I always tell myself, I'm grateful for life. I'm grateful for breath. And I'm grateful for my program. And the planner says to write 3 things down that we're excited for. And I was excited to see my caregivers and my family and my friends. And we're also told to write down a daily focus And my focus every day was to be mindful and present in this moment. And with every in-breath of the ventilator, I would smell or do my best to smell. And with the out-breath, I would taste. And with the next in-breath, I would listen. And with the next out-breath, I would feel whatever I could feel. And sometimes that was pain. And I would do my best to have gratitude for the pain that I felt, because I didn't have feeling in most of my body. And the planner also suggests that we write down an affirmation or tell ourselves an affirmation. And my affirmation was, and still is, I am enough. I was also grateful that we found the healing channel, and that healing channel showed images of nature and played instrumental music. And I knew from my experience with mindfulness that this would be calming and help me in my recovery. And my insomnia and anxiety was at a really heightened level. So every night I would play the Surrender Meditation by Jason Stevenson. And the nurses would play it over and over for me as I did my best to sleep some. And I practiced my loving kindness. Some call it a meditation, some call it a prayer. And for me, it always went like this. May I be kind and compassionate. May I be humble and accepting. May I be honest and accountable. May I be forgiving and committed. May I love kindly and kindly love. And now it also extends to thinking of those in my life and my relationships. And it includes, may you be safe. May you have peace. May you be happy. May you be safe. May you have peace. May you be happy. And these tools for recovery help me recover through this difficult time and continue my resilience which is to me defined as the ability to experience difficulties and come out stronger. And my hope for myself and for you, well, for myself first, is that I continue to have improvements in my quality of life as someone living with paralysis, and that we find a cure for spinal cord injury. And my hope for you and my loved ones and myself is that we find healing in the program that we work for ourselves. Thank you. I love you.
Thank you, Rex. And I love you too. Rex, can you explain more what working a program means?
To me, working a program was getting a sponsor and working through the steps. And this is where I believe my perfectionism really helped me, because I wanted to get this down and I didn't want to feel the pain that I felt. And I believe that if I got through these steps and followed Joe's advice to go to 12-step meetings and work with a sponsor who would take me through the steps and work the steps to get to a place where I actually didn't skip them. I believe that I could find healing, and I could feel that I had spiritual healing, and that I had a spiritual experience and a spiritual awakening. And doing the growth steps of 10, 11, and 12 every day, and getting to a point where I could admit that I had fears and resentments, and that my self-will, fears, and resentments were harming other people and myself. To get to that place where my issues were, where I could admit that my issues were contributing to the issues that my loved ones were having. Instead of blaming them for my misery, I understood that my misery was contributing to their issues and contributing to my misery. I think that learning to pray with God and surrendering to a power outside of myself was huge. I really believe that when I was my own sponsor, my sponsor was an idiot. It's funny and true. And I'm so glad I believe that now.
Yeah, that's probably one of the best memories I have of walking into climbers and hearing Joe make fun of you about that. Sponsor. Is there anybody else that would like to ask a question or make a comment? Well, I just want to take this moment to, and I know I've shared this with you before, Rex, but Rex was a huge support to me and my family, and has went beyond the call of duty to spend quality time with my kids, with me. He wasn't afraid to call me out on my BS. And we've had some heated discussions because of that. And I treasure all those moments. They were all learning and growing for me. That honesty is key to recovery. And I think Rex is one of the main people that has shown me that, set that example. And I'm just so grateful for that. And he's such an inspiration, as I think you all have just witnessed. Well, I know you've witnessed it. If there's not any more comments or questions, I mean, this is the time to talk about if you're a person who has a loved one with self-destructive behaviors or addiction problems. We're all seeking answers, and you know, we all come into these meetings because we're trying to find solutions for them. And I think, you know, what you just heard is that Rex found solutions for him. And I think that's a key part of recovery, because I thought the same thing. And Sarah, you have your hand raised.
So I just made a comment, and Rex, would you just make a few really practical comments about working a program with mobility issues? Because in some cases, as we are very easily defeated in our intention to work a program, the pandemic may have got between us and our real need to work a program. Can you share some of the best resources other than the beautiful third step prayer?
Yes, thank you for asking that. It's a great question. My friend Alan Brown told me that the pandemic is helping everyone realize what it's like to live with paralysis. We've all been paralyzed with this pandemic, and we've had to adapt and learn how to use Zoom and connect on phone and do things differently. And I would say that's one thing that's really helped me, even though it's not my preference. It is amazing that we have Zoom. I don't know where everyone is, but we're connecting probably throughout the nation. So that really helps me work a program. I can find almost any meeting I need, almost any time. Having said that, it is very difficult, and I don't want to be the victim or say that my mobility issues are worse than yours. but they are definitely different than when I was not paralyzed. And working a program all in my mind and finding alone time to meditate and pray and not write in my Panda Planner and have it all in my head and work my program as people are getting me dressed, for example, getting up and out of bed takes 2 hours now, which sounds horrible and was horrible and is horrible. And I get 2 hours to work my program. Every morning I get 2 hours to work my program, to pray and meditate, extend loving kindness to other people, say the Serenity Prayer, say the third step prayer, ask that I don't harm others with my thoughts, words, and actions. And in some ways, I work a stronger program because of that.